The last Shah of Iran, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, was married 3 times. His second wife, Soraya Esfandiari, couldn't have children, but his first and third wives gave him 5 in total. But today, we're focusing on the one who came first, his eldest daughter, Princess Shahnaz Pahlavi. Born into royalty, wealth, and prestige, you'd think she was destined for a life of influence. But despite being the Shah's firstborn, she was never the golden child of the family. Unlike her younger siblings, she was kept in the shadows, far from the public eye. But why was she overlooked? What struggles did she face as the daughter of a ruler whose reign was filled with conflicts? And after everything, where is she now? Stick around, because this is the untold story of Princess Shahnaz Pahlavi, the forgotten princess of Iran. Shahnaz Pahlavi was born on October 27, 1940, in Tehran, Iran. She was the first child of Mohammad Reza Shah and his first wife Fawzia of Egypt, a princess from one of the most prestigious royal families in the Middle East. You'd think that being born into royalty would be a moment of pure celebration. But for Shahnaz, it was anything but. From the very beginning, her birth was met with disappointment, especially within the Pahlavi family. Why? Because of an old prophecy that had haunted the dynasty for years. Legend has it that Reza Shah, her grandfather, was warned of a curse. If the firstborn child in the royal family was a girl, the king would either be exiled or killed. Sounds ridiculous, right? But when you look at how things played out for her father, it's hard to ignore. On top of that, the entire royal court had been expecting a boy. They had planned huge celebrations, but when they found out it was a girl, all those plans were scrapped. You can just imagine the awkward silence that followed. Still, her father tried to make the best of it. He even named her Shahnaz, which means the king's pride. But no matter the name, she wasn't the son the royal family had been waiting for. If life was tough for Shahnaz, it was even worse for her mother, Princess Fawzia. From the start, the Pahlavi family never truly welcomed her, and after giving birth to a daughter instead of a son, things only got worse. Her husband grew distant, and the weight of it all took a serious toll on her, both physically and mentally. The isolation, the pressure, the disappointment all became too much to bear. Eventually, she couldn't take it anymore. In May 1945, when Shahnaz was just 5 years old, Fawzia made a heartbreaking decision. She packed her bags and returned to Egypt, leaving her young daughter behind. At first, the Iranian side refused to approve the divorce, and this is where things get a little calculated. The Shah and his twin sister Ashraf weren't going to let Fawzia go so easily, so they started using Shahnaz as a tool to try and get Fawzia back. They made sure pictures of her were published in newspapers and magazines, hoping that seeing her daughter in the media would pull Fawzia back to Iran. They even asked the Iranian ambassador in Egypt to convince her to return. But Fawzia never came back. After years of back and forth, the divorce was finally made official on November 17, 1948. But instead of admitting the real reasons, Iranian authorities pushed a different narrative. They claimed that Fawzia left because Iran's climate had negatively affected her health, as if the weather was the real problem. And perhaps the most heartbreaking part. One of the conditions of the divorce was that Shahnaz had to stay in Iran, without her mother. And just like that, Shahnaz lost her mother. Her father, meanwhile, was too busy looking for his next wife to spend time with her. Her grandmother wasn't exactly warm and loving either. It was a lonely childhood. She wasn't the son they had wanted, and at the same time, she blamed her grandmother for pushing her mother away. The only person in the family who truly cared for her was her aunt, Shahnaz Pahlavi. Shahnaz spent a lot of time with her and was mostly raised by palace staff. She attended a kindergarten in Tehran and, like many royal children at the time, had European tutors, mainly French. As she got older, a private primary school was set up just for her, with her classmates being the children of nobles and high-ranking military officers. But at just 8 years old, she was sent away to boarding school in Switzerland, Mary Joseph School, where she stayed for 5 years. During that time, she barely saw her father. He was too caught up in his own world to make time for his first child, the one who needed him most. But her mother was the complete opposite. Fawzia made the effort. Despite the distance, she was present in her daughter's life in a way her father wasn't. She would board long flights from Egypt to Switzerland, crossing thousands of miles just for a few precious moments with Shahnaz. It wasn't easy. Travel in the 1940s wasn't what it is today. The journey could take over 10 hours with multiple stops along the way. But no matter how exhausting it was, Fawzia never hesitated. She showed up. She made sure her daughter knew she was loved. And for Shahnaz, those visits meant everything. It was her only real connection to the mother she had lost too soon. After finishing school, her father decided it was time for her to go to the United States. There, she reunited with her aunt Shams and her grandmother, Queen Mother Taj ol-Muluk. And just like that, her early years came to an end. From the very beginning, she had been the daughter no one celebrated, caught between two worlds, longing for the love she never truly received. Then, in 1951, the Shah married his second wife, Soraya Esfandiari. This meant 10-year-old Shahnaz now had a stepmother. To her credit, Soraya genuinely tried to bond with her. But it wasn't easy. Shahnaz had already been influenced by her grandmother and aunts, who had nothing good to say about the new queen. So naturally, she kept her distance. That summer, things didn't get any better when Shahnaz was finally allowed to visit Tehran. But instead of staying at the palace with her father and Soraya, she was placed in a small house nearby. Not exactly a warm welcome, but over time, something changed. Slowly but surely, her relationship with Soraya improved. And when the Shah eventually decided to divorce Soraya, Shahnaz was actually one of the few people against it. Now, when Shahnaz got older, her father, like most kings back then, wanted to use her marriage for political gain. He had his sights set on King Faisal of Iraq as a potential husband for her. Faisal was young, powerful, and charismatic, but none of that mattered to Shahnaz. She didn't want to marry him just to strengthen ties between two countries, and, to be fair, the Shah didn't force her. Instead, in 1957, when she was 16, she married Ardashir Zahedi, the son of General Fazlollah Zahedi. Their wedding at Golestan Palace was surprisingly small, in contrast to the over-the-top royal celebrations the Pahlavi family was known for. The official reason for this? The Shah claimed it wouldn't be right to throw a lavish event while so many Iranians were struggling. Well, I mean, that actually makes sense, but let's be real, there was more to it than that. Behind the scenes, people whispered that his lack of excitement wasn't about the country's hardships, it was about Shahnaz herself. This wasn't a political move or a strategic alliance. This was her choice. And maybe that's why it didn't matter as much to him. At first, it seemed like Shahnaz had found happiness. She and Ardashir welcomed a daughter, Manaz, and for a while things looked good, maybe even perfect. But behind closed doors, not so much. Ardashir was charming, well-connected, and ambitious. He was the kind of man who always seemed to get what he wanted. And as you might expect, this drew plenty of attention, both in political circles and, well, other circles. Over time, rumors began to spread, whispers of late nights and affairs that Shahnaz couldn't ignore. At some point, it all became too much. Their marriage slowly fell apart, and by 1964, it was over. The divorce hit Shahnaz hard. After everything she had already endured, her parents' broken marriage, growing up without the warmth of a loving father, this betrayal felt like another wound that would never heal. She sank into a deep depression, and that's when things took a dark turn. She met a man named Khosrow Jahanbani, the son of a general but had more of a free-spirited, artistic side. Rumor has it that he had admired Shahnaz for years, and after her divorce he became a close friend, offering her comfort. But he also introduced her to drugs, and soon enough she developed an addiction, and when the Shah found out, he was furious. He even considered having Khosrow locked up. But despite her father's anger, Shahnaz chose to be with him. In 1971, they got married in Paris, and this time the Shah wasn't happy about it. He strongly opposed the marriage at first, but eventually, thanks to some intervention from Farah Pahlavi, his attitude softened. He accepted their relationship, but under strict conditions. They had to live in Switzerland, away from Iran, and Shahnaz had to get clean. Their marriage lasted for decades, until Khosrow passed away in 2014. Together they had 2 children, a son named Khosrow and a daughter named Fawzia. Before the Shah's death, he made sure to divide his estate among his children. Shahnaz was given 8% of the inheritance, while her daughter Mahnaz received just 2%. At first, she accepted it without complaint, but when she later discovered that her half-sisters, Farah and Layla, had received more, her feelings changed. She was furious. After everything she had been through, this felt like yet another reminder of where she stood in her father's eyes. She was his firstborn, but even in death, he seemed to favor others over her. She even took the matter to a French court, but regardless of the legal battle, the money she inherited was more than enough for her and her family to live a comfortable life, far away from the royal court and its power struggles. After the Iranian Revolution, Shahnaz made her choice. She would never return. Instead, she remained in Switzerland, the place where she had spent most of her life, away from her family's drama. And in 2013, she was granted Egyptian citizenship, thanks to her mother, Fawzia. So, was her life tragic or fortunate? Well, it depends on how you look at it. On one hand, she endured a lonely childhood, lacked real parental love, faced an unfaithful husband, battled depression, and struggled with addiction. Despite being named the king's pride, she was never truly valued by her father. He longed for a son, and his attention was always elsewhere. But, in another way, she was luckier than most of her family. While the rest of the Pahlavis were forced into exile, caught in political turmoil, and hunted after the revolution, Shahnaz found stability. She built a life away from politics, away from the chaos that destroyed the dynasty. And even though her mother left when she was little, Fawzia never abandoned her completely. She made the effort to visit her in Switzerland, giving Shahnaz at least one steady presence in her life. In the end, maybe that's what mattered most, having a life where she could finally find some peace. That's all for today's video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more updates. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.